Welcome to the Flight Club Podcast, a woman's guide to leaning out. We give you a behind-the-scenes look at business launch and growth through the stories of successful female entrepreneurs. Here's your host, Felina Hansen, founder and CEO of Hera Hub.
Hello and welcome. I am excited to share my conversation with Hillary Berman. She is the founder of Popcorn and Ice Cream. We will explain what that is. It is a marketing agency. We'll go into more detail on that. It's a very creative name, and we'll get the story behind the name. She is in Washington, D.C., a marketing agency focused on small businesses and startups. She is also an author of a very, very good book on marketing. It's called Customer LLC, The Small Business Guide to Customer Engagement and Marketing. She lives in Bethesda, Maryland with her husband and, as she likes to say, her 3 budding entrepreneurs. So welcome to the show today, Hillary.
Thanks, Selena. Happy to be here.
Awesome. I am excited to share your story, your entrepreneurial path. So take us back, maybe back to college. Where'd you go? What'd you study? And then take us along your career path up until the point you launched your business.
Sure. I went to undergrad at Syracuse University in Central New York, and I studied advertising in the Newhouse School of Communication. And I started with advertising because even in high school, I was trying to find something that allowed me to blend something more creative with something businessy. And advertising kind of did that. And then as my career has gone on over the years, it's all been different iterations of sort of that same thing, staying business oriented, but with a more creative bent to it. After school, I moved to New York because that's what everyone who goes to Syracuse does. You go to New York, you live in Manhattan, you go to a lot of happy hours. And I worked for I got my dream job at a huge, big Madison Avenue ad agency, and it was totally not for me.
Oh, really? Why?
So I went and I was working on all these big names, brands that everyone's heard of, major consumer packaged goods. And it was very corporate, and it just wasn't, there was a lot of process, and it wasn't really my thing. And so I went to work for a .com because that's what everybody did at the time. And it was super fun, and like a whole bunch of them, it went out of business. But it was an amazing experience. And I like to say it was Facebook before its time. It was a .com that had what is now the Facebook wall with messages to you and your friends where you could post what you were up to. It had different groups functionality. It started out targeting the college market. It was totally Facebook, but it was 1999 and people were not online in the way that they are now. Everyone still had dial-up. We all had flip phones. So the world wasn't quite ready for it yet. I moved back to DC and got a job working for a technology company in marketing. And then along the way, went to business school part-time. I went to University of Maryland to get my MBA. I did it at night because I was afraid to leave the job market. The economy was questionable as the .com world was kind of blowing up. So I got my MBA, which I still think was one of the best things I ever did, not because I didn't change career paths, but it gave me really, really good perspective into how marketing both influenced and was influenced by other parts of business. So if I ran a really successful marketing campaign, I learned about how important the supply chain was to fulfill what we sold, and how important, if we offered discounts, what did that mean for profits and the balance sheet. And so it really gave me great perspective on how all the parts of the business came together. In the process, I changed jobs, and I was working for a big PR marketing firm focused on technology. And I was there for 7 or 8 years. And then when my first son came along, I realized that even though my boss was very, very supportive of working moms, that I really just was not loving that world. And at the same time, my husband was starting his own business, and he couldn't find the company that I ended up starting. So we were trying to find him a marketing strategist, someone to help him figure out what his brand was, what the customer experience for his business was going to look like, how to get new leads, how to close those leads, all of those things. And I found really, really great creative resources, copywriters, web developers, photographers, all of those things, but no one to help guide him how to pull those things together and sort of how to leverage those resources. So I went and helped him with it, and then realized how big the need really was for smaller businesses, and started Popcorn and Ice Cream to do that. And that was in now 2011 when I did that.
Great. And what was your husband's business, or what is your husband's business?
He's a financial advisor and wealth manager, and he was leaving a big named organization and going to hang out his own shingle and go independent.
Got it. Yeah, I love that. You started the business that your husband needed for his business. That's great. So over the course of being, an entrepreneur now and stepping into that, did you, how did that initial sort of feeling, what was it like? Was it like, I got this, I'm good, I know exactly what I'm doing? Or was it, did you ever question yourself along the way, I guess, Hillary?
Sure. I mean, I think I never questioned myself, because I knew, I think we all have our things. Imposter syndrome wasn't really one of mine. But I had to figure out the right way to make the business work and make the kind of impact that I wanted to. So I knew there was this need for small businesses to have marketing strategy. And I knew that because they don't need, or they can't afford these big agencies, whether they're in New York or downtown DC or Chicago or San Francisco or wherever, right? Sure. They can't afford a $20,000 a month monthly retainer, and they don't need that. And I could bring that kind of that support to them, but I had to figure out the best way and who my target market was. I think that was the hardest thing, because even though I really believe in small business and I wanted to support small business, as a small business myself trying to make money, not every small business was the right client for me. And so I realized I had to sort of narrow down what small business meant for me and how big a small business had to be before I could really help make a difference for them. And so over the years, I evolved. That's how the book came to be. So there were small business owners who were just so small and really right out of the gate that even though we tried to price our services for smaller businesses, even that was too expensive. So that's why I wrote the book, to say, okay, for $16.99 on Amazon, here's our perspective on the world. It's not specific to you and your business, but this is how we approach situations. And so that gave those teeny tiny, truly new business owners at least a starting point and some guidance for a really, really cheap price point. We tried workshops to give people more group support. That was not the best fit we found. And then, of course, we continued consulting. But I think the biggest challenge for me was really defining who our customer really was, which is something we encourage all our clients to do too.
Yeah, it is one of the most challenging pieces of the puzzle, right? And such a critical foundational part of running a business. It does take a bit of trial and error.
And you want to help everyone, but you really, you can't help everyone. And so for small business owners, I encourage them to narrow their target market. Like, your target market can't be all women from 40 to 60, right? That's not a reasonable target market. So, who's really in your target market? And that really allowed us and me to grow the business and find the right clients where we could make the biggest impact, which is at the end of the day what we were trying to do.
Absolutely. So talk about, over the last few years, some of the companies that you've worked with, types of clients, type of work you've been doing.
Oh, they've been all over the map. So that was one area where we didn't really focus. We said, we're not going to narrow by industry. So we helped launch an organic sports drink, and we've worked with law firms, and our biggest, longest client is a language translation company. And we worked on baby clothing. And the companies have really been, we opened a grocery store. Like we've worked and fitness studios. And I mean, so we've done everything from professional services to products to bricks and mortar and retail, and all over the map. And it's been really interesting because it's amazing how much applies from one to the other. And I think a lot of times people get very stuck in their own industry. And when they start to look out, there's a lot of good stuff to be learned from other industries that you might not think applies.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. So I want to talk about some of the tools, so to speak. And I want to go back to something that you said, Hillary, when you were talking about your education, because you and I have a bit of a similar path in some ways. And, I think it is interesting when we look back on what used to be defined, what we would define marketing now, the fact that your degree was in advertising, right? And there are I don't think there are any degrees in advertising anymore, right? Because that used to be synonymous with marketing, right? And now marketing means 100 things, quite literally. So, and advertising is just one like small piece of that puzzle. So, just talk about some of your favorite tools, maybe even give us a client case study if you like, but some of the things that you see smallish to mid-sized businesses really utilizing now.
So I think it very much varies based on the company and the product and also who their customers are. What I think people get very stuck on, I have to use whatever the hottest social media platform is of the week. A little bit ago, I would have said it's Instagram or Snapchat. Now people are all hot on TikTok, which I don't even know how to use, but I can ask my 13-year-old. But, or people like, oh, well, I have to do Google ads, or I have to do an email newsletter. They get, a lot of times businesses get caught up in the I have to. And I think it's actually a matter of what works. What I always encourage people to do is look at what's going to help you make the connection that you need to connect with your audience and make a sale, right? So does something, as you look at platforms, I encourage people, and it's funny that I did have a degree in advertising because I very rarely do we do any advertising for our clients anymore.
I know.
But in some cases, that is the best fit, right? So in some cases, Google ads are the end all be all to drive leads. In other cases, the language translation company, for example, the bulk of that business comes from trade shows and industry conferences. Literally setting up a booth at an industry conference and doing booth duty, which I haven't done in a really, really long time, but now I'm doing again with them because it drives very, very qualified leads. So I always encourage businesses to start with rather than go, oh, I have to do marketing, is to say, what are my business goals for the year? And then what are the tools that are going to help me get there? So are my business goals to get more leads in the door? Or are my business goals to convert the leads I already have? Or am I trying to drive referrals? Or, so we have another client where one of the best things that we've done is put in place a campaign to try to get more Google reviews because they're too small and they're in a really competitive industry, so they can't afford to make any impact with Google ads. But by working on driving Google reviews, their search has come up. They're coming up and their SEO is coming along. And it's also helping them close deals because people are seeing it and go, oh, well, I looked you up and wow, you have amazing reviews. People say such amazing things. So they couldn't afford to compete because Google ads, you used to be able to throw $100 a month at it and make a real difference. That's not the case anymore. So how can you, but for them, that was a great campaign. So it really depends on, I always encourage people to say, what are you trying to achieve? And will this platform help me get there? And if the answer is I want greater awareness, that is not a goal.
Yeah.
that's not a tangible goal. What is something that you can actually measure?
Yeah.
And likes on a Facebook post, that's not a real measurement.
Totally. And I see so many small business owners as well just get so wrapped up in I should, like you said, I should be on this
Yeah.
platform, and they get lost in it and they're spending so much time on this. And I'm like, wait, if your customer is not on
Right.
TikTok, don't go on TikTok right now. Right?
Right. Like I mean, I work with a whole bunch of different clients, but none of them are targeting 13-year-old boys. So I have no need to learn how to use TikTok. But,
Yeah.
if I did, I'm lucky I have that resource in house. But, it's what makes the most sense for who you're trying to target. And if your goal is driving likes on an Instagram post, but it's not converting to sales, that goal doesn't make sense to grow your business.
Totally.
So for me, marketing has to relate directly to revenue.
Yeah.
And if it's not driving more revenue, what's the point? It's like you said, it's too time consuming.
Yeah, it really, really is. I want to talk about you are a small business advisor for Google. What does that mean?
So it's a program that Google started several years ago to try to put more local support and faces on Google for small startup businesses. It's mostly companies that do that do Google platforms for businesses. So the companies that help you with ads or your Google My Business. But in my case, it's more just submitting content for them and joining Twitter chats to provide feedback for people and that sort of thing.
Okay, great. I want to go back to your book as well. That is a huge undertaking. Talk about
Yes.
the process of writing the book, and you talk about a lot of specifics in the book. Again, really targeting that very early stage entrepreneur. So perhaps also share a little bit of advice or structure that the book takes.
Yeah, so the book was, like I said, it was intended to help those very early stage folks who are just getting started, or the ones who maybe you're on your path, you're on your journey, but you're not sure where to start with marketing. It was written because people who were in some of those places said, we can't afford to pay for consulting, but how do we get your perspective? And so the book is intended to walk people through how to approach marketing. So how do I make decisions about which marketing programs make the most sense? How do I talk about my product? How do I price my product? But more importantly, how do I put it on sale or not put it on sale? And then it talks about different tactics. It does not tell you how to create a Facebook campaign, because the second I would have written it down, it would have been dated.
Yeah, exactly.
But it talks about how to approach social media. It talks about how to approach in-person events. So on in-person events, a lot of times bricks and mortar businesses will say, oh, we're going to have an open house, or we're going to have an anniversary sale or something like that. But then they don't get a lot of people that show up. So it talks about how to make the most of those events. But the whole book is written from how do you make your business attractive to customers? How do you put yourself in the customer's shoes? Because more and more, everyone's buyers, we are all so busy, right? People, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably driving around in your car, sitting in traffic, right? That's when I have time to listen to podcasts anyway. But you're competing. So when you're selling something, whether you're selling a product or a service or whatever it may be, you can't just constantly be selling and pushing messages on people, because it's going to get lost. And so the whole book is written, it's intended to say, okay, how do you put yourself in your customer's shoes and think about all these business things from your customer's perspective? So what makes them, what are things that turn them off, and what are things that bring them in, and what are things that make it really easy for them to buy from you? Because my goal in all the marketing that we do is to say, how do we make it easier to sell something? Whether that is getting people the information they need to make a decision, making sure they're aware you exist, making sure the pricing is appropriate, making sure your sales and coupons are easy to use. So all of those, the entire book is written from that perspective of how do I make my business customer centric so that they want to buy from us in the first place, and then we can stay engaged and connected with them so that they come back again and again, or they tell their friends to come and buy from us too.
Absolutely. It sounds like it would be a great textbook, even as I think about when I taught marketing at the college level for 8 years. We were always struggling to find, a current up-to-date book that made sense. There was a lot of textbooks that were just kind of old school.
One of my former my faculty advisor from undergrad, she actually uses it with her. She does these really awesome study trips where she takes groups of students to South Africa and I think some other places, but I know she uses it with her South African courses, and it's required reading for her students because they're going in and working with, it's a very practical, hands-on, I think 3-week mini-mester kind of course, and they go in and they are working with small local businesses in South Africa, and it's required reading for them to bring those
great.
ideas and that perspective in. So that's kind of exciting.
Yeah, that is exciting. All right, but before we get to the future, I've got to go back and ask you about your business name, Popcorn and Ice Cream. I'm sure you've been asked that 8 million times.
We have, and it's funny. The name is as much what it's not as what it is. So when I started, I had an old boss who, at my old agency, he said one of the biggest mistakes he made. He's very, very successful, multi-million-dollar agency now, but he hated that his name was on the door. He felt that was very limiting in a whole bunch of different ways, and so I never wanted my name on the door of the business, and I didn't want anything that was DC centric because we at the time could, and now since have clients all over the country. And so I didn't want something that was too DC oriented. And then every creative name that I came up with, and I thought I was clever and creative, and I went to look up URLs, it was taken. So we started just throwing around random names and words and ideas, and then it sort of came out, and then we built a marketing story around it after the fact. So the marketing story that we built was that there are endless combinations and different ideas, and same thing with small business and startup businesses. There's lots and lots of different flavors of them, and you really need the salty and the sweet to go together to make everything work. And so we built that story after the fact, and there were lots of times, though, in the first few years that we thought about changing it. I went, God, is this too playful? Is this just not right? Are people going to think it's weird? And then eventually it just kind of stuck, and it's what we became known for. And I realized that the name was almost unimportant by comparison to the work that we did.
Sure.
That the name was memorable, but that's not how we got referrals. We got referrals because we did great work for clients, and that's what they wanted.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that. And speaking of great work, one of your clients has become one of your main clients, I understand. Tell us more about what's on the horizon for you.
Yeah, so Popcorn and Ice Cream has been around since 2011, and in 2020, the end of 2019, we're pretty much wrapping up operations, and both myself and one of my colleagues on the Popcorn and Ice Cream team were going in-house with our biggest clients. We've been working with them for 8 years and grown the business right alongside them. And now the business has grown to the point that it makes more sense for us to be in-house on the team than outside as consultants. So it's the really great thing about consulting is it's been there for me at a time in my life and my career when it made sense, and I know it'll always be there for me should I want to go back to it, but it's also provided me a path to a really great new opportunity that I just can't pass it up. I have the ability to maintain the flexibility in my work schedule for my family and do great work that I really enjoy, and remove one teeny tiny piece of the juggle from being an entrepreneur. There's plenty of other juggles working there too, but it's not juggling multiple clients. It's just juggling multiple projects for one organization.
Yep, absolutely. I understand.
So,
it's an ebb and flow
excited.
For sure. Yeah, that's
Always.
great. That's great.
And I still get to be an entrepreneur because it's still a very young, growing business. That I still get to be a part of that, the entrepreneurial community, and being a part of growing something and all the things that I love. So
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we do hope to keep you in the entrepreneurial community. Thank you so much
and
for
I
all.
get to keep my Hera Hub membership.
Oh,
So
cool. Okay, good.
the important
Awesome.
thing.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Well, Hillary, if anybody listening to this podcast wants to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Sure, you can always get me at hillaryberman.com, HILLARYBERMAN.com, which right now redirects to popcorn and ice cream, but you never know. But you'll always get where it'll point in the future, but you can always get me there.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Hillary.
Thank you. It's fun chatting.
Thank you for joining this week's episode of Flight Club, sponsored by Hera Hub. We look forward to sharing more success stories with you soon.